Welcome to the very first episode of All Levels English Lab podcast. I'm Sarah, and I'm absolutely delighted to be starting this journey with all of you.
And I'm Michael. It's great to be here, Sarah. We've been looking forward to launching this series for English learners who want to take their skills to the next level.
That's exactly right. Today we're diving into a topic that's absolutely fundamental for language learning success: how to build a daily English learning routine. This is something that so many learners struggle with, but getting it right can completely transform your progress.
Absolutely. We all know that consistency is key when learning any language, but actually maintaining that consistency day after day is where most people face challenges. Today, we're going to explore practical strategies to make English learning a natural part of your daily life.
Before we get into the specifics, I think it's worth discussing why having a daily routine is so crucial. Michael, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, from a cognitive science perspective, our brains learn languages most effectively through regular exposure and practice. When we space out our learning over time, we strengthen neural pathways and move information from short-term to long-term memory. It's like exercising a muscle. You get much better results with regular, moderate workouts than with occasional intense sessions.
That's a perfect analogy. And I think it also relates to the psychological aspect of habit formation. When something becomes a daily habit, you stop needing willpower to make it happen. It just becomes part of your normal routine, like brushing your teeth.
Exactly. And that's what we want to help our listeners achieve today: a sustainable daily routine that feels natural rather than forced. So where should we begin, Sarah?
I think we should start with the foundation: setting realistic goals. Many language learners fail because they set overly ambitious goals that are impossible to maintain long-term. They commit to studying for 2 hours every day. Then when life gets busy, they can't keep up and end up quitting entirely.
I've seen that pattern so many times. The all-or-nothing approach rarely works. It's much better to start with something manageable, even if it's just 15-20 minutes a day, and build from there. What matters is consistency, not the amount of time you spend on any given day.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to emphasize that quality matters more than quantity. 15 minutes of focused, active practice can be more beneficial than an hour of passive, distracted studying.
That's such an important point. Active engagement is crucial. So let's talk about what makes a good daily routine. What elements should be included?
I believe a balanced routine should include multiple language skills: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. But the exact mix depends on the learner's goals and current level. For example, someone preparing for an English exam might need more writing practice, while someone planning to travel might focus more on speaking and listening.
And I think it's also important to incorporate both structured learning and more natural exposure. Structured learning might include working through a textbook or using a language app, while natural exposure could be watching movies, listening to music, or reading articles in English.
That balance is key. Too much structured learning can feel tedious, while too much unstructured exposure might not lead to systematic improvement. The ideal routine combines both approaches.
Let's get practical. What are some specific activities that learners can incorporate into their daily routines?
For listening practice, I recommend starting the day with an English podcast or news broadcast. Even just 10 minutes while having breakfast or commuting can make a huge difference over time. The key is to choose content that's slightly above your current level, challenging enough to learn from, but not so difficult that you get discouraged.
Great suggestion. And for speaking practice, many learners find it challenging because they don't have conversation partners. But there are workarounds. You can practice speaking aloud to yourself, describing your surroundings or explaining your thoughts. Some learners even record themselves and listen back to identify areas for improvement.
That's an excellent point. Self-talk is a powerful tool that many people overlook. And technology has made it easier than ever to find speaking practice partners through language exchange apps and online conversation clubs.
What about reading? That's often the easiest skill to practice regularly since you can do it anywhere with your phone.
Reading is fantastic because you can tailor it to your interests. If you love cooking, follow English cooking blogs. If you're into technology, read tech news in English. When you're genuinely interested in the content, you're more likely to stick with it. I recommend starting with shorter articles and gradually working up to books as your vocabulary and stamina improve.
And for writing, it doesn't have to be anything elaborate. Even writing a few sentences in a journal each day about what you did or how you're feeling can be incredibly beneficial. The key is to get comfortable expressing yourself in written English.
I completely agree. And these days, with smartphones, you have so many tools at your fingertips. You can use vocabulary apps to learn new words, grammar apps to practice tricky structures, and even AI tools to get instant feedback on your writing.
Which brings us to an important point: leveraging technology effectively. There are so many language learning apps and resources available, but it's easy to get overwhelmed. What's your approach, Sarah?
I recommend choosing just one or two core resources that you use consistently, rather than jumping between many different apps. For example, you might use a vocabulary app like Anki or Memrise for daily vocabulary practice, supplemented by a grammar reference for when you have specific questions.
That makes so much sense. And I think it's important to remember that apps should supplement, not replace, authentic language use. The goal is to communicate with real people, not just to complete app exercises.
Absolutely. Now, let's talk about the practical aspects of actually building these habits. Many people know what they should be doing, but struggle to actually do it consistently. What strategies do you recommend for making English learning a daily habit?
The first thing I'd suggest is habit stacking. This means attaching your English learning habit to an existing routine. For example, if you already have a habit of drinking coffee every morning, you could decide to spend 15 minutes on English practice while you drink your coffee. By linking the new habit to an established one, you're much more likely to stick with it.
That's such a clever approach. I also recommend setting up your environment for success. If you want to read in English every day, leave an English book on your nightstand or download English news apps to your phone's home screen. Make it as easy as possible to start your practice.
And I think it's crucial to be realistic about your schedule. Look at your daily routine and identify pockets of time when you could realistically fit in English practice. It might be during your commute, while waiting in line, or before bed. Everyone has different optimal times based on their schedule and energy levels.
That's so important. Some people are morning people and do best with their language practice first thing, while others might find they're more alert in the evening. The key is to work with your natural rhythms rather than fighting against them.
And let's not forget about tracking progress. Keeping a simple log of your daily practice can be incredibly motivating. It could be as simple as putting an X on a calendar for each day you practice. Many people find that they don't want to break the chain of consecutive days.
I love that strategy. Visual progress indicators can be very powerful. And I also recommend celebrating small wins along the way. Did you successfully have a short conversation in English? Celebrate that. Did you understand most of an article without a dictionary? That's worth acknowledging too.
Absolutely. Positive reinforcement helps solidify habits. Now, let's address some common challenges that learners face when trying to maintain a daily routine. What do you think is the biggest obstacle, Sarah?
I'd say it's probably finding time when life gets busy. We all have days when we're exhausted or overwhelmed, and the thought of adding one more task to our to-do list feels impossible. On those days, even a minimal practice session, like reviewing 5 vocabulary words or listening to one English song, can keep the habit alive.
That's such an important point. The don't break the chain mentality is helpful, but it's also important to be flexible. Some days you might only manage 5 minutes, and that's okay. What matters is not letting a 0 day happen where you do absolutely nothing.
Exactly. And I think another common challenge is staying motivated when progress feels slow. Language learning isn't linear. There are plateaus where it feels like you're not improving, even though you are. That's when many people give up.
Those plateaus can be so frustrating. I recommend setting smaller, short-term goals that you can achieve more quickly, alongside your long-term language goals. For example, learn 10 new words this week, or have a 5-minute conversation without switching to your native language. These smaller victories provide the motivation to keep going.
That's excellent advice. And I think it's also helpful to vary your routine occasionally to prevent boredom. If you always practice grammar with worksheets, try watching a comedy show in English instead. If you typically read news articles, try a short story. Novelty can reignite your motivation.
And let's not forget the power of community. Finding other English learners to share your journey with can provide accountability, support, and motivation. This could be a language exchange partner, a study group, or even an online community of learners.
Absolutely. Learning with others makes the process more enjoyable and less isolating. Now, I'd like to share a sample daily routine that listeners might adapt for their own use. This is just a template, of course. Everyone should customize based on their goals, schedule, and preferences.
Great idea. Let's hear what a balanced daily routine might look like.
So, for a beginner to intermediate learner, I might suggest something like this. In the morning, spend 10 minutes listening to an English podcast or news segment while getting ready for the day. During your commute or lunch break, use a vocabulary app to learn 5-10 new words. In the evening, spend 15 minutes reading something in English. It could be a news article, a blog post, or a few pages of a book. And before bed, write 3-5 sentences in English about your day or your thoughts.
That's a well-rounded routine. And it totals only about 30-40 minutes spread throughout the day, which most people can manage. For more advanced learners, you might increase the time and complexity of these activities. For example, instead of just listening to a podcast, you might listen and then summarize what you heard either in writing or by recording yourself speaking.
Exactly. And I think it's important to emphasize that this routine should be adapted to individual needs. Someone preparing for a presentation at work might focus more on speaking practice, while someone studying for an academic test might prioritize reading and writing.
And what about weekends? Should the routine be different?
Weekends are a great opportunity for more extended practice or immersion activities. You might watch a full movie in English, have a longer conversation with a language exchange partner, or spend more time reading. But I still recommend doing at least a little bit of English practice every single day, even on weekends, to maintain the habit.
That makes perfect sense. Consistency is key. Now let's talk about some specific techniques that can make daily practice more effective. Are there any methods you particularly recommend, Sarah?
I'm a big fan of spaced repetition for vocabulary learning. This is a technique where you review information at increasing intervals over time. Apps like Anki and Memrise use this approach automatically, showing you words you're about to forget just before you forget them. It's incredibly efficient for building long-term vocabulary.
Spaced repetition is fantastic. And for listening practice, I recommend what's sometimes called extensive listening, listening to content that's mostly comprehensible to you, even if you don't understand every word. This helps you develop listening fluency and get comfortable with the rhythm and flow of English.
That's so important. Many learners get stuck trying to understand every single word, which can be frustrating and slow. It's better to focus on understanding the general meaning and letting unfamiliar words pass by. You'll gradually absorb them through context over time.
And for speaking practice, I recommend shadowing listening to a short audio clip and then repeating it immediately, trying to match the pronunciation, intonation, and rhythm as closely as possible. This technique can dramatically improve your speaking fluency and accent.
Shadowing is excellent. And for reading, I suggest keeping a vocabulary journal where you note down new words you encounter, along with example sentences. Reviewing this journal regularly can help reinforce your learning.
These are all great techniques. Now let's address a question that many learners have. How do you know if your routine is working? What signs should you look for to indicate progress?
Progress in language learning can be subtle, especially in the early stages. You might notice that you're understanding more of an English movie or TV show without subtitles. You might find yourself thinking in English more often, or dreaming in English. These are all great signs that your brain is absorbing the language.
And I think another important indicator is reduced mental effort. When you first start learning, everything requires intense concentration. But as you progress, you'll find that understanding and producing English becomes more automatic and requires less conscious effort.
That's such a good point. And of course, there are more tangible signs of progress too, like being able to express more complex ideas, understanding jokes or wordplay, or having longer, more natural conversations.
But it's also important to remember that progress isn't always linear. Some weeks you'll feel like you're improving rapidly, while other weeks you might feel stuck. This is completely normal, so don't get discouraged during the plateau periods.
Absolutely. And I think it's helpful to do periodic self-assessments. You could record yourself speaking once a month and listen back to compare your fluency and pronunciation. Or you could try reading something that was challenging for you a month ago and see if it feels easier now.
Those are great suggestions for tracking progress. Now let's talk about adjusting your routine over time. As you improve, your needs will change, right?
Definitely. What works for a beginner won't necessarily work for an intermediate learner, and so on. I recommend reassessing your routine every couple of months to see if it's still serving your needs. Are you still challenged? Are you making progress in the areas that matter most to you? If not, it might be time to make some changes.
And as your English improves, you can start incorporating more authentic materials into your routine. Instead of using simplified learning materials, you might start reading regular news articles, watching movies without subtitles, or listening to podcasts designed for native speakers.
That's such an exciting milestone. Engaging with authentic content is incredibly motivating because you're using English to access information and entertainment that you genuinely enjoy, rather than just studying the language itself.
Before we wrap up, I'd like to share some success stories to inspire our listeners. Sarah, have you worked with learners who successfully built daily routines and saw remarkable progress?
Oh, absolutely. I remember one student, Maria from Brazil, who was a complete beginner when she started. She committed to just 20 minutes of practice every day before work. At first, she struggled with basic greetings and vocabulary. But after 6 months of consistent practice, she was able to have simple conversations. After a year, she was comfortable discussing everyday topics. And after 2 years, she got a job at an international company where English is the primary language of communication.
That's an incredible transformation. And it all started with just 20 minutes a day. I worked with a student named Kenji from Japan who had a similar experience. He was preparing to study abroad in the United States and was worried about his English skills. He created a routine that focused on listening to academic lectures and taking notes in English, as well as practicing speaking with a language exchange partner 3 times a week. By the time he left for the U.S., he felt confident enough to participate actively in his university classes.
Those stories show what's possible with consistent practice. And I think they highlight an important point. Everyone's journey is different, and the right routine depends on your goals, schedule, and learning style.
Absolutely. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to language learning. The key is to experiment, find what works for you, and stick with it consistently.
So, to summarize what we've discussed today, building a daily English learning routine is essential for consistent progress. Start with realistic goals, create a balanced routine that covers multiple language skills, use effective techniques like spaced repetition and shadowing, track your progress, and adjust your routine as you improve.
And remember that consistency matters more than intensity. It's better to practice for 15 minutes every day than for 2 hours once a week. Find ways to make English learning a natural part of your daily life and be patient with yourself as you progress.
We hope this episode has given you practical ideas for creating your own daily English learning routine. Next week, we'll be exploring common English learning myths and misconceptions. You won't want to miss it.
If you found this episode helpful, please consider subscribing to English Mastery Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And if you have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes, you can reach out to us on our website or social media channels.
Thanks so much for joining us today. Remember, the journey to English mastery is a marathon, not a sprint. With consistent practice and the right routine, you can achieve your language learning goals.
This has been All Levels English Lab. I'm Michael.
And I'm Sarah. Happy learning, everyone. We'll see you next time.